Good morning, Maryland. I hope everyone's doing well. Welcome to the Planning Department's Planning Directors Roundtable. My name is Chuck Boyd, and I am the Director of Planning Coordination for the Maryland Department of Planning. This is the fifth of the Planning Director Roundtables that's virtual, and we've been averaging about 80 registrations per session. In fact, this one is one of our most popular, and we're at 90s registered for today's event. So I think this virtual approach has been very helpful to getting attendance, and we're able to get people from the Western Maryland, Eastern Shore, along with those in the central area together in a virtual setting. So this has been a very positive environment for us. So again, I want to thank everyone. We're all still have a couple of people coming on board. So these are some preliminary remarks that I'm going to share with you. I want to thank you again for attending. And if you have any suggestions on how to improve the effort or the quality of our production, we most welcome that. And again, please stay in contact with us working through our regional planners. So if you are a regular to the Department of Planning's newsletters, you also likely get our invitations to the Smart Growth Network webinars, and we have an upcoming one. In fact, we had one just yesterday, creating transportation equity from the ground up. It was one that had a equity CM credit for AICP members, along with an 1.5 AICP CM credit. So we're going to continue to do these, and it's one of our major outreach efforts that we hope you appreciate. Next one on our webinar scheduled for May 18th is the Tactical Urbanism, Taking Short-Term Action to Generate Long-Term Change. If you're able to attend, we hope you do, please go to smartgrowth.org. To register, you just click on the title and you'll get a registration just like you did today. So again, hope you have the chance to partake some of those webinars. We also have archived many other past webinars if you're interested. So feel free to peruse around that website. Just to point out, we are recording today's webinar, and we'll be posting the full recording on the Planning Director's website, Roundtable website at the end, either today or tomorrow. We'll also include the PowerPoint presentations that our presenters are going to share with you today. We'll also note that there are a variety of other items on that website if you are interested in reading more about some of the different areas. We encourage you to visit the Planning Department's website on a regular basis. We try to keep it up to date and active. Just a few things for orienting you that many of you that may have already been involved with using the GoToWebinar format, but if you're not, the toolbar on the upper right hand side provides you some basic information about, you will see some notices throughout our session if there's answer any questions. If you have questions, please put them in the question box. I will be monitoring those throughout the presentations, and we will have a Q&A at the end. So feel free to do that entry at any time. You don't have to wait until the end at all. So the first thing we want to do is we'd like to take a quick poll of the participants today. We'd like to know where you are located in the state of Maryland. So take a minute here, and John Coleman will get you a poll to see where you are using the regional map that we're showing here. And we got the results coming in right now. They're being collected. Just give you another couple seconds to vote, and we'll get those in here. Close it out. Okay, so the results are the Central Maryland has 46%, followed up by the Eastern Shore, 31%. We have 10% in the Capital Region, and a tie for Southern Maryland and Western part at 6%. So that's good. That's good. We appreciate the participation from throughout the state, and we again welcome everyone to today's event. So today's speakers, we actually have two main presentations and quite a few updates. So our two presentations, starting out with Jason DeVoe, who's the manager of Planning's Resource Conservation and Management Unit, and Matt Rowe, Assistant Director of Water and Science Administration at the Maryland Department of the Environment. They're going to give you an overview of the recently updated online water resource element guidance, models and guidance document, which provides links to online maps and informational resources intended to better facilitate that local land use and water resource planning effort that you're working on, or anticipate the next time you do your comp plan updates. After their presentation, we'll have an opportunity to ask questions that you may have related to your community's WRE planning effort. Following that, Al Sendera, manager of the Planning's Projections and State Data Center, and I will update you on Planning's effort to create a statewide building permit reporting system in collaboration with our local partners, and how this effort is really intended to improve the quality of data used for local planning. We want to hopefully you'll learn some information about what information is going to be collected and the kind of reports that are being considered for sharing with you. Planning is interested in hearing your input into potential ways to better address this issue of collecting planning and economic development data. Following those two presentations, we are going to have updates from state agencies on some of the projects that we've been working on over many years. John T.J. Thomas, from the Assistant Director from MDOT's Office of Planning and Capital Program Management, will provide you an overview of the Maryland State Freight Plan. Sylvia Mosser a planner from the Planning's Resource and Conservation Unit, will provide you an update on some of our brownfield redevelopment assistance program efforts. Al Sendera will be back to share with you information on the 2020 census and the 2016 to 2020 American Community Survey updates. Shelley April is going to provide you an update on the she's a planner from the Planning's Geospatial Data Analysis Unit, is going to provide an update on the Generalized Zoning Project. And Deb Sward, Assistant Manager from the Geospatial Data Analysis Unit, is also going to provide you an update on the statewide land use plan. And then finally, Sarah Deal, who's a planner with our local assistance and training section, is going to provide you an update on our collaborative effort with the Department of Commerce on the compatible use and development with military installations. And at this point, I'm going to, with this preliminary information out of the way, I'm going to give Secretary McCord a chance to give a few words before we proceed with the webinar.
I want to welcome you to the Department of Planning Semi-Annual Planning Directors Roundtable. I'm sorry I can't join you today. This forum for problem solving, sharing information and resources also provides a direct line of communication to the professionals here at Planning to discuss issues of concern in your areas and to identify state resources that might be available to assist you. there are any good side effects of a pandemic, we were able to strengthen our education and training services to the planning profession through these types of video conferences and by the numerous webinars we've been sponsoring. You may be aware that we at Planning regularly sponsor webinars covering a wide range of topics relevant to the interests of professionals and the general public. We are nationally recognized as a leader in planning webinar training. I'm proud that since 2018, more than 100,000 people have registered at MDP's more than 100 webinars, featuring some of the country's leading planners and practitioners who share their knowledge and lessons learned from case studies across the country. Today, Jason Dubois of our staff and Matt Rowe of MDE will provide an orientation of the 2022 Proposed Water Resources Element Guidance Update website, which is another example of the educational resources we are providing local governments. This Element Update website was a collaborative effort among several state agencies and demonstrates our approach to providing accessible online planning tools that enable you to scale the level of planning effort to meet the needs of your community. We know there are jurisdictions that may need to take a comprehensive assessment of water supply and demand, stormwater management, as well as the impacts of sea level rise and climate change. This site can walk you through that entire process. However, other jurisdictions that have prepared a water resources element back in 2010 might find not much has changed and only require minor updating of numbers and the confirmation of existing policies and strategies. This online WRE Toolkit provides you all that flexibility. It's important to note that the 2022 Proposed Water Resources Element Guidance Update is the first phase of a multi-phase work plan effort. We welcome any suggestions you might have to improve this planning tool. Our second presentation today is an update on the department's ongoing investigation of a statewide building permit reporting system. Last year, we reported on the Maryland Building Permit Software Survey report. We heard from a number of jurisdictions that have used the results of the software survey as they evaluate replacing their existing building permit software system. Since completing the software survey, our planning staff has been working with the BMC staff and jurisdictions in the Baltimore metro area to begin to collect building permit data. We will share with you some findings of our initial investigations and potential benefits of developing a statewide building permit reporting system. We very much appreciate everyone's cooperation in this very large and complicated project. We welcome your input into the analytical tools that we develop and how best to present this information in an interactive dashboard. During the General Assembly session, I had a discussion with Chairman Barve concerning his bill, House Bill 705, which was seeking to increase the collection of building permit and other data. It was evident from the bill hearing that the legislators were interested in affordable housing. The bill would require reporting of the total numbers and types of new dwelling units created and was seeking information that is not always readily available. I agreed to meet over the interim and help to refine what he was interested in obtaining within the limits of what is actually currently available. He withdrew the bill, and I look forward to the meeting with the chairman. I hope you find the state agency update section of today's Planning Directors Roundtable informative. We are trying to provide you with regular progress reports on these multi-year efforts and to show how your data and recommendations have helped to shape the work products we're developing. I do want to provide a few state data center updates. As far as redistricting is concerned, the adopted maps and the data tables for all legislative and congressional districts are posted on our website. We will not have precinct maps until the local election boards have finished their work, but we will make them available when they are available to us. The adopted maps have been shared with the Census Bureau for tabulation of census data using the new boundaries, also for new ACS data releases and new geographic data products. School enrollment projections. The draft projections shared with school districts for review and comment are now being reviewed and are coming back to us. School enrollment is projected to grow by about 15,600 students over the next 10 years in Maryland. The 2020 census data. Data reports will be created for all jurisdictions, counties, and municipalities and shared with all. The State Data Center will provide assistance as needed for jurisdictions looking for data to use in any of your comp plan updates. The Census Question Count resolution. The State Data Center will provide technical assistance for jurisdictions considering challenges to census counts. Remember That process is an address-driven process. Jurisdictions may see an increase in population if they can show that the U.S. Census Bureau has missed housing units. It's not about missing people as much as missing the units that they should have been in when they went to count. So we'll continue the tradition of accepting nominations for the 2022 Sustainable Growth Awards starting May 2nd. Please look for the email blast from the department for more details. Every year we get outstanding nominations, and last year was our most successful year with 25 nominations. Please start identifying projects in your community that have been recently completed and that you're exceptionally proud of. The nomination process is easy, so we want to encourage you to submit your nominations for categories such as leadership, sustainable communities, and preservation and conservation. Additionally, if you have any interest in serving on the review panel for this year's Growth Awards, please email Chuck Boyd. We look forward to seeing your nominations and could use a few good reviewers. Thank you for attending today's Directors Roundtable. We hope you will find the information we're sharing with you today useful. Please feel free to contact the presenters should you have any questions, or contact your regional planner should your community need any assistance. And every planning director is always free to contact me if you have a question or concern about the Maryland Department of Planning. With that, I hope that your time together will be well spent, and I wish each of you a good day. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary McCord. Really appreciate that. We've asked Planning's Chief of Staff, Adam Bruce, to provide the Planning Directors Roundtable audience a recap of the 2020 legislative session from the planning perspective. So welcome, Adam.
Thank you, Chuck. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you, Chuck, and thank you, John, for making sure I was able to get in. I appreciate that. So as Chuck said, my name is Adam Bruce. I'm the Chief of Staff of Planning, and I handle all of our legislative relations. Chuck has asked me to come and just give kind of a general overview, a sampling of what the legislative session was like. In the broadest terms, I'll just say that the 2022 session was very environment and natural resources heavy. I'm sure many of you have at this point have heard about the Climate Solutions Now Act and some of the other bills that are passing. They've seen a lot of bills that have invested in resources. There's a Conservation Finance Act bill. There's a few other things that are going on. In addition to, it was very, as Secretary McCord alluded, there was a lot of interest in affordable housing issues. So we met with Chairman Barve to discuss his bill, and there are a few others that have come through. And also, as the Secretary alluded, redistricting was a big thing this session, both congressional and state legislative. I did want to point out a few bills for you, just for some things that I think you might be interested in. First and foremost, there were several agritourism bills that expanded agritourism throughout the state. There were a few counties, Worcester County and Queen Anne's County in particular, who altered the agritourism definition for their specific counties. In addition to that, there were some agritourism bills that were statewide as far as expanding the definition of agritourism. Beyond that, some bills that I want to flag for you, and I'll put the asterisk on there that these are all still subject to approval by the governor. So they've been passed by the General Assembly, but the bill signings are still ongoing. First, House Bill 318 is Environment On-Site Wastewater Resources Regulation. Another bill, House Bill 478, Economic Development Enterprise Zone Program Alterations. House Bill 777, Real Property, Partition of Property. House Bill 927, Housing and Community Development, Affordable Housing, List and Disposal of Excess Real Property. House Bill 1300, Beach Erosion Control District, State and City-Owned Structures. And House Bill 1451, Housing and Community Development, Business Projects and the Business Development Program, Financial Assistance. And last one that I had on my list was SB 528, the Climate Solutions Now Act of 2022, beyond the ones that Secretary McCord already covered. So just like I said, I just give you a little sample, a little taste of what the session was like. And it was a unique session in the sense that there was a lot of federal funds that came into the budget due to the COVID response pandemic. And so you may have heard that the budget was in a good shape this year, and the state was able to make investments in other things that it otherwise would not have because of the additional federal funds that we received. So, anyhow, that's a little sampling of the session, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to Chuck, and I'll get you answers as best as I can.
Thank you, Adam. Just quick question or confirmation. You can provide me that list. I think I saw a list because I will add that to our posting so that people that were trying to feverishly write down all of those particular bills, they can go to hopefully our website, to the Planning Directors Roundtable, and pull up that list, right?
Absolutely, I can get you the list of the bill numbers for sure.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you again, Adam. Thank you again, Adam.
Yep.
All right, great.
Absolutely.
So appreciate that, Adam. And without further ado, we are going to now move over to the water resource presentation, water resource element presentation by Jason DeBow and Matt Rowe. Welcome, Matt and Jason.
All right, thank you. I'm going to share my screen in a second here. All right, can now look at the audience view. John, as you taught me. Okay, everybody, again, you can hear me okay?
Sure can.
Yeah, yes.
Thank you. Okay, well, thanks everybody for being here today. We are going to review, as folks have said, the 2022 proposed water resource element guidance update, best practices for integrating climate change and identifying suitable receiving waters. So to provide a quick overview for folks who might not know, the water resource element is one of the required chapters in local comprehensive plans, both municipal and county comprehensive plans. And the two main purposes as outlined in statute includes to identify drinking water and other water resources that will be adequate for the needs of existing and future development proposed in the land use element of the comprehensive plan. And secondly, to identify suitable receiving waters and land areas to meet stormwater management and wastewater treatment and disposal needs, again, of existing and future development proposed in the land use element of the comprehensive plan. So this page talks about what's new and why. As many folks may be aware, the water resource element was a new requirement and back about 2006, and the state agencies, MDE and planning, provided a guidance document back in 2007 that outlined how to meet the water resource element requirements. And counties and municipalities began to create water resource elements and adopted them starting around 2010. So it's been about 15 years. And what has changed in a couple instances here, of course, climate change is a much more recognized issue now than ever before. And so this new guidance document provides checklists and best practices to integrate climate change considerations, particularly flooding risks, which are the biggest hazard that we in Maryland are experiencing from climate change. And then secondly, integrating those into water resource element assessments for drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater. And then, of course, secondly, to identify and protect receiving waters and water resources as the local land use plan is implemented, consistent with Maryland Department of the Environment's current water resources programs. And so why are we doing that? Because much has changed over the last decade with regard to MDE's implementation of water resource programs and Clean Water Act, especially, for example, Chesapeake Bay TMDL. The last thing that's new here is that we have this online. We've previously provided models and guidelines as print documents and then PDFs online, but starting with a number of our recent guidance, including the housing elements guidance and others, we are placing our guidance through a website that provides more easy access to a variety of existing web-based resources at the state and federal level that can inform the water resource element work. And so we're hoping that it makes it easier to update that over time and to the most relevant and recent resources to help with water resource element planning. So keep in mind that as Secretary McCord was talking about, this is a series of changes we're making to the water resource element. The current drinking water assessment and wastewater assessment guidelines of the 2007 water resource element guidelines are still current and should be followed. So at this point, we have not updated those, but they are still relevant and they should be followed. So there is a lot in the guidance. There is a lot of information and steps to teach about many different things related to those two issues I mentioned. And to try to simplify things, we've included a number of checklists to try to outline, for example, in bold print, the most important aspects of this guidance to focus on. And we have these lists of expectations as well, recognizing that local governments need to know what they need to do this time around when they're working on the water resource element. So one of the first things is ideally before your next comprehensive plan update to begin doing data compilation and analysis work as you read this water resource element guidance. Ideally also, if you can get your agencies involved that work on emergency management, planning, and also your various utilities, water, drinking water, and stormwater, to get together and begin discussing what vulnerabilities you've already experienced or you expect to happen due to weather-related issues, as well as to climate change impacts. We recognize, though, if time or staff or financial resources are not available, we want WRE to at least identify data analysis gaps and resources needed before your next comprehensive plan update. So read the guidance still and spend some time including strategies in the WRE to at least talk about what needs to happen next time before the next comprehensive plan update. Speaking of technical assistance providers, we've identified different units within or administrations within different departments. Of course, the Water and Science Administration at MDE, the unit that I manage at MDP, the Chesapeake and Coastal Service at Department of Natural Resources, which provides significant financial and technical resources on these issues, and of course their Maryland Geological Survey. Other groups we can put you in contact with, we can try to solicit their assistance. So whether they're nonprofit or non-governmental organizations, local soil conservation districts, or Maryland Department of Agriculture, we're here to help you to connect with them, and we will do our best to obtain their assistance with various issues that are specific to your locality. Okay, and then with regard to these next two slides talk about when to update your water resource element. So as Secretary McCord was saying, you've already put in a lot of work into your existing water resource element. Do you need to make updates to it? We do ask that if you have not made any consideration yet regarding climate change impacts to your water resources or to your different utilities, water, stormwater, sewer, that you do make some changes to your next water resource element to talk about those issues. Related to that also, if you haven't been analyzing the possible impacts from, let's say, implementation of your land use plan, whether it's new development in flood vulnerable areas or to sea level rise areas. If your water resource element hasn't been analyzing your land use plan to think about those types of issues, we ask that you update your water resource element to consider those issues. Even outside of climate change, one brand new thing about this guidance is that in addition to stormwater quality issues, we're asking that you consider stormwater quantity issues. As I said at the beginning, flooding is one of the most significant and increasing issues related to climate change. But even without climate change, if your water resource element has not considered flood risks or identified your locally flood-prone watersheds, we want to see an update related to that. Okay. And then with regard to, let's say, receiving waters and whether your water and sewer systems are ready for your proposed land use plan, think about whether there have been any significant new water resource issues happening, whether it's, let's say, declining availability in your aquifers or, let's say, declining quality of your receiving waters, a brand new TMDL or other limitations or brand new capacity of your infrastructure. If you have a very significantly different land use plan, increased densities, or let's say you're decreasing your growth area. Again, those are issues where you want to reconsider your water resource element analyses. And of course, if your water and sewer demand is exceeding 80% of your available capacity or appropriation amounts, we ask that you take another look at your land use plan and your water resource element analyses of water and sewer needs. You may find in these three issues that you either need to scale back your land use plan efforts, or you may be able to accommodate more development than you had previously expected. Okay, so I'm going to turn the presentation over to Matt Rowe now, and thank you.
Thanks, Jason, and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you this morning. So I wanted to provide a little bit of context for the updates we made to the water resources element guidance with respect to water resources management. And one of the big rationales, I guess, for updating the WRE, as Jason mentioned earlier, was that when the original water resources element guidance was developed back in 2007, that was pre Chesapeake Bay TMDL. So a lot of Chesapeake Bay restoration work was done in a voluntary framework, and with the 2010 TMDL, Chesapeake Bay restoration transitioned from a voluntary restoration approach to a regulatory approach to restore water quality. So recognizing those changes, we wanted to provide some updated guidance with respect to water resources management in the WRE. So what this graphic does here is talks about and tries to describe and really give local jurisdictions understanding of how the Clean Water Act framework works. So they have that understanding going into their water resources element update and can provide relevant information. So this graphic here provides a broad overview of the Clean Water Act framework to identify the different aspects local planners should be familiar with when preparing your WRE. And if you start at the top of the slide in that white box that says develop water quality standards, it's got kind of a bold outline to it. That's really where it all begins with respect to water quality in Maryland and in regulation. We have water quality standards for all waters in Maryland. An example would be, and those are based upon designated uses. So there's designated uses for each water body in Maryland. And then depending on those uses, there's specific water quality criteria, water quality standards that apply. So an example would be out in Western Maryland, we have a number of designated trout streams. use 3 waters that have more stringent temperature requirements, for example. So a good place for locals to start when they're preparing their WRE is what water quality standards would apply in the areas where planned growth and development is occurring. So Maryland's, be familiar, and there's links again in the web-based WRE to get you to water quality standards, so you can kind of drill down to what standards may apply in areas slated for growth and development. So that's a good place to start to know what water quality needs to be attained in those areas. And then after that, in Maryland, we have many, with our sister agency, Department of Natural Resources, we have many water monitoring programs that allow us to assess whether those water quality standards are being met. So depending on, be familiar with the monitoring data, whether, for example, if you have an area that's under a TMDL, the water quality information will help you to determine whether your restoration programs, whether through your permits, you're improving water quality in those areas or not. And again, that may influence what you want to do with planned growth in those type of watersheds, whether you want to put additional control measures in place to improve water quality and improve those water quality trends. So that's something you want to be considered, want to consider when you're preparing your WRE. What's the water quality trends? And once you understand that, you can understand whether this is a watershed where you is under a TMDL framework that needs to be restored, or are these high quality waters that are already better than water quality standards, and you want to protect those watersheds with any new planned growth and development. So understanding the monitoring data, you'll understand where those waters fall, whether they need a TMDL or not, and whether they're under a restoration or protection framework. And that can really help guide, again, the tools that you want to use to make sure that you're continuing to protect those waters, or whether you need to do more work to restore those waters, and consider that in the context of your growth and development plans and any additional controls you may want to put in place to achieve those goals. Also, as Jason mentioned, there's a tie-in to climate with water resources, and one of the biggest impacts to water resources that we're expecting in Maryland due to climate change is increased flooding. We're seeing more extreme events, microburst, cloudburst type events where we're getting incredible amounts of rains over very short durations. So that's something you also want to consider if you're having planned growth and development in an area where you already know there's local flooding concerns. There may be additional measures, maybe additional water storage and additional stormwater management practices, or maybe you want to look at culvert sizing in those watersheds, or if you're having conveyance problems with stormwater in those watersheds, and just ensuring that if you're planning growth and development in those flood vulnerable areas, that you're taking that into account, and thinking about how you can not exacerbate and hopefully lessen flood vulnerabilities or increases in flood vulnerabilities that may be associated with impervious surfaces or runoff that's going to come along with new development. So that's certainly something that you want to consider as well. Now on this next slide, oh, I think we're ahead in the slides. Can you go back one? So these all link, all these in the presentation, and this will be shared with you. Each of these areas that I just discussed, knowing your water quality standards, there's hyperlinks to that part of the web-based guidance, so you can go there and get to the specific guidance for those pieces. So everything's hyperlinked here in this presentation that hopefully helps you navigate to these areas, and kind of gives you sort of a methodical process by which to update your WRE. So next slide, please. Also, and kind of the beauty of the web-based guidance is that we provide, as Jason mentioned at the top, we provide hyperlinks to current tools and resources. And if new tools come online, we can easily update the guidance to include those links to resources. But right up now, you'll see on the website that we have best practices. And again, all these things are hyperlinked here in the presentation, so you can easily navigate to them. You're going to see best practices concerning addressing water-related climate change issues in the sensitive areas element. So there's connections between the water resources and sensitive areas element, where you can sort of make sure that these two are aligned and climate considerations or best practices are consistent or mutually reinforcing within those two elements. There's also best practices for assessing water hazard risks and accounting for climate change adaptation in your WRE analyses. So again, back to the issue of how do you assess risks? Do you have flooding risks in the watersheds where planned growth and development is occurring? Are there other hazards that make the area where planned growth and development is occurring an area where you really want to consider those vulnerabilities and make sure that you're not making matters worse or putting additional controls in place to lessen any climate risks associated with planned growth and development. We also provide an overview of FEMA's framework for hazard management planning, which can be a useful tool to identify hazards and vulnerabilities. We provide other examples to climate change risk to water resources and infrastructure and communities. And there's other links to tools and data analyses and different strategy approaches and language that you can use when you're preparing your WRE. Next slide. Okay, another area that is a little bit newer, and I know we're all trying to navigate right now, but it's important, and certainly a lot of federal funding with Climate 40 is really going to be now focused on environmental justice areas or areas, again, socially or vulnerable or historically disadvantaged communities. That's something that we also wanted to make sure in this guidance that we put on your radar and encouraged you to think about planned growth and development through an equity lens when you're developing your WRE. So when you're planning new growth and development, think about, think in the water resources element how plan changes and related infrastructure impacts with those decisions may have impacts on disadvantaged communities. So you might want to ask yourself questions like, will planned growth and development result in any changes or augmentation to drinking water sources that could impact vulnerable populations, such as folks that are already have lead service lines or fixtures? Do you have need or inventories of lead service lines or fixtures in communities, schools, or industries that will inform your efforts? So if you're planning growth and development right next to a vulnerable community, there might be opportunities there to ask yourself, how can you sort of leverage this planned growth and development to also make conditions better in adjacent, maybe disadvantaged communities? Are there water supply issues in those communities? Are there lead service lines in those communities? While you're putting new infrastructure in for new development, can you address some of these legacy issues with that planned growth and development as well, and sort of integrate those considerations into your development process? So just thinking broadly and creatively about opportunities like that to address vulnerabilities and inequities with new planned growth and development is an opportunity that's good to consider. And also, again, there's going to be increased federal resources that are going to be targeted in vulnerable areas that you can leverage if you're smart and thinking up front about how you might want to go about doing that with new growth and development and capitalize on those opportunities. Next slide. And really, this is just an acknowledgement that we need to get out and kind of get the word out, and we have plans in 2022. This is a great example of where we're getting the word out to local practitioners, local partners on the WRE, kind of the general expectations that we're looking for as you go about updating your comp plan and your water resources element, and that more trainings will be pursued throughout the year to get this word out. Also within the agencies, we want to make sure that when you do have updated comp plans or WREs that you want us to review, that we're working together across the agencies to review those in a coordinated way, and that we're providing consistent feedback and guidance and advice to you as you go about that process. So we're, again, just a point we're working internally within the agencies to make sure that we're a resource to you and we're providing consistent feedback. Next slide. And at this point, we'll open it up for questions, and thank everyone for your participation.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Jason. We are going to be looking for some Q&A questions, but we did happen to have a few questions that I think are relevant. Can you tell, either you, Jason, or Matt, can you tell me about the impact of different climate laws that were passed by the General Assembly and how they would impact the WRE planning?
Well, I could take a stab at that. With the, it's a great question, and timely. The tricky thing, I guess, with this guidance particularly is, since it's a water resources element guidance, we needed to be very consistent with that. And that's back to the point that with respect to water resources, probably the biggest impact that we're expecting in Maryland is flood impacts. You know, we're seeing, if you look at the national climate assessments in the Northeast, precipitation is projected to increase into the future. So that's the biggest impact and the biggest tie-in specifically with the WRE that we want you to think about and focus on. With the Climate Solutions Now Act, and it's the other piece of climate that's very important, is greenhouse gas reduction goals and carbon mitigation and sequestration. So in my understanding, the Climate Solutions Now Act is really focused on reducing carbon emissions, setting more effective, more aggressive goals. I think the new goal in that act is to have net zero carbon by 2045. So that's a big, new kind of big audacious goal in the Climate Solutions Now Act. But there, that act also does create some new work groups that are now part of the Maryland Climate Change Commission that are, and I believe they are, under the new statute, supposed to develop some report outs by 2023, some reports and recommendations. So there might be more that comes out of it that's relevant to, you know, water resources specifically. But again, my understanding right now is the big focus of the, and there's a lot of other components to the Climate Solutions Now Act too, but that really it's very mitigation focused. There is, and I'm not sure if it's part of the Climate Solutions Now Act or separate, but there is now too, I think, a new resiliency person that's going to be within Maryland Department of Emergency Management, and that, you know, is dealing with hazard mitigation planning and sort of adaptation in that emergency planning context. So there is some relationship there, I would say, and we'll just need to kind of see how that unfolds and kind of adapt to that as we move forward. Jason, I don't know if you have thoughts about that.
No, I think I agree with you. And I think the one interesting thing about the involvement of this new Office of Resilience, which I don't think the governor has taken action on that particular bill yet, but if it becomes law within the Department of Emergency Management, perhaps there would be even more of a strengthened tie between MDE's Comprehensive Flood Management Grant Program and the Department of Emergency Management's Hazard Mitigation Planning. There's already a strong connection, but maybe that will even increase even further and connect these other types of water resource adaptation challenges.
It's my understanding that there was a PowerPoint presentation on the law, and we have put a link to that for the audience to take a reference to more of these details. Can you tell me about MDE's ACE storm effort and how it would impact the WRE planning?
That's a great question. And hopefully we just wrapped up on that. We just wrapped up 3 regional meetings for ACE storm to get local feedback. I think that was kind of Western, Central, and Eastern regional meetings. So with ACE storm, there is a a good connection there. One of the things that A-Storm is focusing on is updating Maryland stormwater regulations to incorporate climate projections, precipitation projections, and make sure that basically our stormwater management program is keeping up with increased precipitation and being modernized with more recent precipitation projections. So that's part of it. And that's going to take some time. I believe probably sometime next year we may have draft regulations for that, but we're also A-Storm, the law requires that we develop an advisory group that's going to help with that. So there'll be a robust kind of engagement process to get there. That's one aspect of the law. So it's going to impact most likely statewide standards with respect to stormwater management. The other part of A-Storm is really looking at, and it's back to what Jason alluded to with the Comprehensive Flood Grant Management Program, really looking at flooding impacts in a more comprehensive way. We know just updating the stormwater standards, that's associated with new development, right? So those are requirements that are going to go into place with new development, but we have a lot of old development out there that may have like undersized culverts or other conveyance problems that are contributing to local flooding. So we really to address flooding in the most comprehensive and methodical way, you need to look at a watershed by watershed basis where you're having flooding problems and really do some studies, take a watershed approach, look at, like I said, conveyance issues, where you're having these local flooding problems, what the cause of that is. So you make sure that any solutions or infrastructure fixes you put in, make the situation better and not worse. It really takes a comprehensive approach. So that's really the other part of it. That I think will, so make a long story short, is we move forward with A-Storm and maybe do some more of these watershed studies. I think that will really start to inform, again, if local governments are planning new growth and development in these studied areas, that could be factored into those studies and to model that and see what the impacts are with respect to flooding and hopefully, better plan for those potential impacts.
And we put the link for the A-Storm effort on the chat as well for folks to view and to get to it. So I got two more quick questions here. I haven't seen the other ones coming in. So where should jurisdictions begin in the effort to identify vulnerabilities in water resource facilities to the worsening of storms and climate change? So where should you begin that process to identify the vulnerabilities?
Matt, I'll say one quick thing to start.
Sure.
I mentioned this earlier, and I actually was talking to Anne Arundel County Planning and their Public Works the other day with one of our regional planners, Susan LaRousse, who's on the call. And one of the interesting things, and we're probably going to try to get them to do a webinar on what they did. One of the interesting things they did, which I mentioned earlier, if you're really trying to figure out what the vulnerabilities are, talk to the folks in your agencies who actually are experiencing these issues already, because climate change is already causing problems already in many situations. So convene your emergency management staff together with your planning staff and with your public works staff, and who are responsible for water, wastewater, and stormwater, and have them start talking about what they think are the priority needs. And Anne Arundel County did that, and over several years, they were able to reach some agreement about what those priority needs were. So whether those were studies or whether there's just adaptation practices necessary. So you may be surprised that a lot of the information you need is already inside the heads of your staff.
thanks. One last question here, and we're going to move forward. How should a jurisdiction identify areas that are vulnerable to flooding now and in the future, including near dams?
Good question. I mean, I think Jason answered some of that. I think your citizens know, and you probably get complaints about local flooding issues. I mean, you know areas that are near 100-year floodplains, and kind of, there's the known, and then there's sort of the more the unknown, and areas you really wouldn't know about unless you're hearing about local flooding concerns by local citizens. So I think kind of, thinking about the areas you definitely know are vulnerable because they're in floodplains or adjacent to floodplains, but also what you're hearing from your constituency regarding localized flooding, or what we might call more urban flooding, is one way, and what Jason mentioned before to go about it. Jason, yeah, I don't know if
anything else, Jason?
Yeah,
any last
Chuck,
closing remarks, gentlemen?
Yeah, I'll just one last thing is yeah, and I'll send John Coleman the link, but one of the links on the guidance website provides links, for example, to some variety of state mapping resources that also could help, like State Highway has their climate change vulnerability viewer, DNR has sea level rise maps. Some of these things you may already be aware of, and some you may not. So I'll send a link in the chat just in case.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. Are there any final closing remarks? And we're going to get moving to the next presentation. Again, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all.
Have a good one now. We're going to move on now and go back to the building permit project that I wanted to share with you. So our next conversation now is going to go into our building permit project. So we have my outline here is kind of what I'm hoping to cover dealing with our state building permit reporting project. I want to give you an overview of how this building permit effort kind of fits into the bigger picture of the Department of Planning's historic ongoing growth modeling efforts that have evolved over time, and I'm really excited about the future of our growth modeling efforts. I also want to talk to you about what information we'll be collecting, anticipate collecting, and then we're going to talk about why we're doing this and what we see some of the real important benefits of doing this building permit data collection. So here you've seen this before. I modified it a little bit. I constantly use this as a guidance tool, but I tweak it every so often along the way to as things add up and as we continue to move through this process. So I wanted to spend just a couple minutes with you on this graphic. As you can see at the bottom, those foundational components, and if you recall back a couple years, I did a presentation on this new growth model or rethinking of it. And there's some things that we've been doing for years, and hopefully there have been useful tools that you use. I know from my local planning experience, Maryland Property View was a very valuable tool, and it continues to be enhanced and improved. We have a preservation protection dashboard, protected lands dashboard that we continue to monitor, and it's used as a metric of preservation. But we also do a lot of other, just data collection and mapping, whether it's water resource, water service mapping, PFA mapping, growth tier mapping. That's really all done at the local level. We're just kind of collecting it. We utilize that information as well as the information on generalized zoning, where we again collect it from you and try to make a statewide mosaic of the zoning. So it's exceptionally useful when you're trying to again look at the big picture and see how things fit together, knowing that each community has their own zoning districts and they're all slightly different. And we're going to talk a little bit. Shelley April will do a quick update of where we are on that. But there's two on the right hand side: building permits and census. census is we're getting the 2020 census, and we have an annual updating of our ACS data. They are really important components of comprehensive planning process, because building permits are really going to, I think, help us inform a lot of these different components along the way, particularly when we get into the development capacity analysis. And one other one that, and we'll hear from Deb Sword on the land use mapping effort, but the one I have changed in here, one of the projects that we're really starting to look more into is trying to get a better handle on how to depict and show and share with locals really your existing housing inventory. Where are the housing units that are out there? And it's easy when it's a single family lot. It's not so easy when it's a multi-family lot, how many units are in there. And we'll explain a little bit more why we're using the building permit process to help us inform that. But let me take a look at our deeper dive into our growth modeling effort. Again, we're trying to redo this growth model effort for the purpose of really trying to create tools that you can use in your local comprehensive plan scenario development process. While we do use these tools at the state level to assess possible state legislative actions or impacts like that, one of the things that we're really trying to focus on is trying to, one, get a better understanding of what's going on at the local level, but also hopefully providing you a resource and a tool that you can easily integrate into your own comprehensive planning process or sub-area level process. So that generalized zoning, as I mentioned before, it is what it is in terms of whatever your zoning allows for as a by right. So we take that information in this kind of model of our growth model effort. We take those generalized zoning, whatever that information is on maximum allowed by right densities, and then we start to look at, okay, well, we know that's not always the end all, and hardly any development I can imagine builds to its maximum extent. There's always reasons why it's less than that. So we are working on getting these factors that kind of reduce or adjust that development densities downward. So the land use map is going to be an important indicator. We know that not all residential land is actually used for residentially zoned land is residentially used. Churches, schools, institutional uses often are on residentially zoned land, and they reduce the capacity potentially in those areas. So that's an important factor. There's land that just never gets developed, and it's in its own residential, and so we recognize that there are different uses that have potential to be adjustments downward in ultimate development capacity. Again, as I mentioned before, we are looking to try to get a better handle on that existing development, housing development, because again, working at the local level, I know that even though it's zoned for higher density, it's got a single family home use on it in a stable neighborhood, it's highly unlikely that unit will go away. And so even though that there's untapped capacity there, it's not going to be really used. So for purpose of us providing a resource of an existing housing inventory, that could be a very useful tool for you in your comprehensive planning process, again, drilling down even to a lower level. So we're excited about potentially developing that. Other things that factor into that reduction of your growth model are a variety of environmental features. Those protected lands, those forested areas, those national and state parks, they're gone. They're out of the development capacity, that is. So even though that they're there, they maybe have a zoning on them of one portion of ag or something like that, but they still are not going to be developed. Floodplain, obviously, is something you take in easements, et cetera. So those are different things that are lessening out the process. And we also know that local governments have their own development regulations and other standards that may influence development side. So that factors into it. And our growth model is going to be working at the local level with you guys to try to figure out those what we call local rules, so that we can factor that and we can develop a more realistic development capacity at the bottom end of that process. So that I wanted to give you that overview for you to understand how this kind of starts to fit together. So building permits, why the heck are we doing that? Don't we have enough already? Aren't we collecting great data already on building permits? Well, unfortunately, the answer is not really. So the existing data on building permits, the SStat collects building permits, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later, or they have them information when a building permit is issued or when a use and occupancy is issued. They have that information, and they extract some portion of that information into their building, their system, which we in turn incorporate into the Maryland Property View. So it's been a useful tool when we build our land use map project, which is based upon primarily the Maryland Property View data, but also the Chesapeake Conservancy land cover information. So that information provides a very useful land use tool, but it has its limitations. You know, as you well know, the census also reports on a monthly basis the number of new construction units, but we have looked at those numbers and they may be adjusted, and Al will talk about that a little bit later. But what's the important thing is that they tend to only be at the county level, and they're definitely not site specific. So you don't know where in the whole county those units are occurring. So it has limited information, and one of the real downsides of SStat's information is they treat multifamily properties as commercial. They don't care how many units are on a unit. All they want to do is assess the value of that, and that really limits our ability to gain enough intelligence about those parcels through SStat's information. So, okay, so again, why are we going to collect this data? What can we do for it? Well, as I mentioned, the census information is not site specific. We do see an opportunity to get much more site specific with the building permit process reporting system. Local governments, if you issue more than 50 permits a year, the law requires you, as part of your planning commission or reporting process, to report on building permits, particularly inside and outside PFA. We think through this reporting process, we may be able to help in diminishing that reporting effort and help provide you data or something that we create in a dashboard or something may actually be able to be integrated into your reporting. So particularly smaller jurisdictions, we may be able to help you and avoid, quite frankly, one of the things we're trying to do is avoid the need for more regulatory requirements on you. And hopefully we can provide that information without that. BMC provides excellent reports, and I want to give a shout out to them. They just have been a super partner in this whole effort. And again, they have an ongoing reporting effort with local governments in the Baltimore metro area, and we continue to want to support and appreciate their support in this effort. So from statewide perspective, we see the opportunity to augment that. We also think we can do some improvements to the state projection process and census efforts, which again, Al will talk about later. So what do we see? Why are we doing this again? We think that we can identify hotspots of economic development activity that is occurring, and we see a real advantage of being able to be, while it won't be immediate, but it will be more real time than a lot of our other reporting efforts have been in the past. So we do see us being able to turn around and report out where activity is. We think it's going to be a valuable tool for economic development purposes and a lot of, again, local intelligence that you may be able to apply, particularly jurisdictions that may not have the resources to delve into these issues. And hopefully if we do an analysis or a reporting for one part of the state or for the state as a whole, it can be scaled down or scaled up or focused in a particular area of a jurisdiction along the way. So again, we're more than happy to collaborate with folks. We're also going to be looking at the improvements. So we want to try to get a better handle on the non-residential square foot added to structures, new structures, as well as additions to non-residential structures, what they call AAR, which is additions, alterations, and renovations. We want to be able to see where that investment's going to go and see if there's any kind of trends in those types of things that are going on. So, as Secretary McCord reported in his welcoming remarks, we're hearing a lot of interest about affordable housing. And the one bill that he mentioned, which was House Bill 705, really was going to ask for a lot more development reporting. We cautioned the legislature because of the need to really get a better handle on it, and the report that they were asking probably wasn't the most effective means of doing that. And we're hoping that through this collaborative efforts with local governments, we can get ahead of that and we can develop a reporting system that can inform you at the local level or state legislators or other ones. And we recognize that building permits are not the sale of the units. We track the sales and we actually do reporting on the sales through the Maryland Property View of those sale information. But I think the building permit activity will help inform a little bit more about that. But we know, certainly I do, that building permits do not immediately equate to affordability one way or another. There's market forces and other things. But the more information that we can provide on supply, I think it will help us address concerns about affordability when they're raised to us and you at the local level as well. So recognizing that there are these different kinds of legislative initiatives going on, we want to be more proactive than reactive if we can. I think we can do some great work together in addressing this thing, and as long as we're not under the gun. So what have we been doing so far in terms of the outreach? Well, again, BMC's been Todd and his group have been, Sean have been outstanding partners at BMC, and we really appreciate their help. And we're going to continue to work with them. And the Baltimore Metro jurisdiction, because they've had that good working relationship with BMC, have been, really helpful. 3 of the jurisdictions already, Howard, Carroll, and Hartford, have already established a monthly reporting process with us. We've reached out to 12 other jurisdictions. I'm going to continue to that effort. One of the things that we are going to develop, and these first few jurisdictions have helped us define what kind of things we're going to provide and what we need, and develop a memorandum of understanding between Department of Planning and the local jurisdictions, so that we can, again, ensure that as you change your building permit software or something that happens at the local level, you let us know. And that we also, as we develop our dashboards and other things that can be, they call them widgets, but basically you can utilize them on your website. We're happy to share all the analysis tools that we build along the way. So again, those are things that we're looking to identify in that memorandum of understanding. So some things that we've already realized and we knew before, but one, there's no new asks in terms of collecting new data. We see that there's a wide variety of jurisdictional detail being collected, a lot of times based upon available resources. But we take whatever you have, and if we see some things that you might want to consider collecting in the future, great. We'll add it to our list. Again, we're focusing predominantly on the permit of the structure. We are less concerned about the owner of the property or the contractors, but actually what's being done on the property, collecting that information, capturing, and then maybe analyzing it. So we also have learned that a lot of jurisdictions already share building permit data with their local SDAT office. This is a great place to start. About 75% of the data that we would really like to have is already often captured in those SDAT reports. There's a few other things that they don't collect that we think would be great for us to include. We want to continue to build on that BMC report, which really focused on the single family versus multifamily, non-residential, residential values. We're looking to try to not only look at the permit side, but also when the property is sealed, because we know that not all building permits that are issued are built upon. And so we want to try to get a sense of that full one. It helps us ensure that the completeness of the data record at CO may catch some changes that occurred, and then secondly, it ensures that we can look at the full cycle and the term of that building permit, collecting information about the types of residential units, single family, detached, townhouses, accessory dwelling units, potentially, as well as, again, additions, alterations to those structures at the residential or non-residential side. We want to get a handle on, if we can, information collected at the local level on bedrooms, baths. It gives us an indication of the character of the housing being built. It may be useful in terms of analysis of housing sizes versus how housing that is built. We obviously want to get a handle on water and sewer service issues and on floor areas for new construction. So hopefully all of this will be built into some dashboards, interactive areas. It's one area that we really, again, we're going to be working on. We don't have all that. I did a little bit of research on this issue before delving into talking to BMC a lot. Unfortunately, or maybe this is not surprising, there's very few states that do this. None of them do it as good as BMC. Delaware, Utah, and New Jersey actually do have some form of state collection process. Utah is done by a university. New Jersey and Delaware are done by state agencies. So those are things that we looked at, and again, we really think that the BMC approach was even the most robust and most promising for us to build upon. So we're in the process of developing prototypes of these things, and we would welcome participation from you on what do you want us to do? How can we create these dashboards and tools that can be used at the local level? We welcome peer review, people to participate in this, and anyone that wants to jump in the deep end and want to work with us on the building permit collection sharing process, before I call you, feel free to reach out to me. I will be calling. I'll be getting to every jurisdiction. We're strategically enlarging the ripples as we go through, and so we're gradually getting larger in this effort, contacting more and more, and I will be contacting more even after this presentation. But we're patient folks, and we're working with it. We're ideally trying to get collections starting in January of 2022. So we may be asking at one point if we can go back and try to capture all those building permits and use and occupancies from the beginning of the year. Usually you have that stuff in some computer file somewhere. So again, I think those are some of the efforts that we're ongoing. This is going to be an outreach effort that working with local governments. But one of the things I just want to highlight, so I've just been talking about the building permit side of things, just to let you know. One of the things we recognize, building permits just deals with the new construction. So one of the challenges that Al is going to talk to you about a little bit more is that we really are having a challenge trying to figure out how many units are on those multifamily multifamily lots. And some places they know about it, some places they don't. One of the things we thought would be a good source is to look at, possibly on a statewide basis, looking at the potential of using your address information. We've found through some initial conversations with some folks that yes, you do addresses for multifamily and you issue an address for the principal structure only, but you don't track or monitor at times the sub addresses, the units A, B, C, D, or floor 1, unit 1, 2, 3, or whatever however the sub-addresses are done. Some jurisdictions actually do track this, others do not. We by no means want to create a statewide address system. We are aware of the Next Gen 1911 process and the collaborations that are involved in that. In fact, we are talking to folks about that and seeing if there are opportunities for it. So, but we're going to talk to you when I come a call in for the building permits. We're going to have a conversation and ask, hey, do you collect building? Do you have an address database? What kind of address database is it? Do you collect sub addresses for within those units or not? And again, we're going to just find out what you have and if you're willing to share that. And again, we'll see where it goes. Our whole effort is to create that housing inventory so that we can deploy a map at one point and maybe get crowdsourcing for other folks to help us really nail down exactly how many units are on these multifamily. We have a couple different ways that we've been working to look into this issue, but welcome any suggestions and any thoughts along the way. So that's about it for me, and I am honored to now pass on to Al Sendera, our manager of the State Data Center, to take over at this point, and then we'll answer some questions that we're receiving. So again, thank you so much. Welcome, Al.
All right, thank you, Chuck. And that was a good overview of the building permit initiative or what we are trying to do. What I am going to talk about is how is the building permits data going to be, how is it being used now, and how do we anticipate to use it in the future, and how we, in the sense, MDP and the local governments can collaborate with this particular initiative. And before I get started with my first slide here, I want to give a quick overview of the State Data Center here at Maryland. The Maryland State Data Center is a partner of the Census Bureau, and this program was established by the Census Bureau back in the early 80s or late 70s. It's been more than 40 years since we have been working with the Census Bureau to have the Census Bureau's data available to Maryland and its residents for analysis and planning purposes. And we pretty much have most of the census data available on our state data center website. And with that said, I'm going to quickly cover some of the ways we use the building permits data. The first slide I have here is how the Census Bureau uses some of the building permits data and some of the programs it oversees or undertakes. So one of the items that Chuck mentioned, the Census Bureau releases building permits data at the county level. And that is foundational, that building permits data is foundational in several programs that the Census Bureau releases, or the data sets they release. And what we have found is the Census Bureau building permits data that is being reported on a monthly basis is not exactly the same as what the jurisdictions submit. There is some imputation going on or adjustments going on with the data, and that usually might affect the population that is derived off of the building permits data. And the second bullet point there says basically the population estimates at the municipal level uses housing units to develop population estimates for the municipalities. So we would like to provide a little more input into this whole initiative of the population estimates program. For the last census, for this 2020 census that was released, and when comparing the data with the census estimates programs information that they release every year, Maryland's population was lower by about 120,000. And our planning data research analysis director, Kanisha Sharma, is undertaking an effort with the Census Bureau to work with them to make sure that the population estimates program is accurately reflecting the population of Maryland. So the building permits data will be really helpful in establishing or verifying the data that the Census Bureau is putting together. So that's that. And other uses of the Census Bureau's the building permits data is for the LUCA program. Most of the jurisdictions, at least at the county level, have help with the LUCA or the local update of census addresses that happens right before the census. And for those counties that did not participate, we helped them. I remember a handful of counties that did not have the capability to work on that program. We helped them. So this building permits data will be used for determining the addresses of the census, where the Census Bureau is going to send the forms. Secretary McCord mentioned about the count question resolution, and the Census Bureau only considers challenges to their census counts based on the residential addresses. So this is really helpful to make sure that we have accurate building permit data. And we also compare the Census Bureau's building permits data with what we have for the count review of the census addresses at the block geography level, and flag all the blocks that have variation of more than 25 housing units on our end versus what the Census Bureau has in their address files. So this is a good way of verifying that we have accurate information that the Census Bureau has to send the census forms. And a couple of other minor items in a way. Group quotas, the location of group quotas, verification as a part of the Census Bureau's program we support. Every year we verify the group quotas locations and their addresses and the occupancy of the group quotas. Having accurate information for the building permits of group quotas would be helpful in helping with that particular program as well. And finally, the urban area analysis is determined using the density, housing unit density at a geography level, and having access to building permits data would help the locals figure out the designation of the area is accurate enough or not as portrayed by the Census Bureau. So on the next slide, we have some information on how the Census Bureau's building permits data is used, is going to be used or used by MDP and some other programs that we undertake. These are basically some of the initiatives we undertake, like the population projections by age, race, and gender. We use a specific methodology like the cohort survival method to develop our population projections. Having access to building permits data would help us verify not necessarily the accuracy of our building for population projections methodology, but also having a feel for where the short-term growth of the population is and if it's accurately reflected in our population projections the way we do it. And for housing units, we do projections for total housing units, derived basically from the population projections we use, which doesn't have a component of building permits in them. It's based on the cohort survival, basically the births, deaths, and migration components. And we look at the housing units based on the average household size, which is projected from the population. But having access to building permits data, at least in the near term, or in some jurisdictions usually have been keeping track of upcoming developments, would at least make sure that we are in line with what the counties are seeing for the housing unit growth. And that would be really helpful. We also project average household size. And in the recent past, we have seen an increase in average household size. And the type of development or the type of building permits that are issued will help us have an insight on what the household size projections are we have projected and what they will look like. And the other two things listed under housing units, the climate change report. We look at developments that as a part of the climate change report that is focused on reducing greenhouse gas, and the type of residential developments that are happening in Maryland, and what percentage of those developments are smaller or compact developments. And that's used as a metric to figure out greenhouse gas emissions. And we also develop housing affordability analysis based on new housing units that were built each year and housing units that are sold every year, and tied in looking at the income data for that specific year for the jurisdiction. We develop affordability analysis and see how affordable the housing units in that particular geography are to the people having a median household income of that geography. And we also use we would like to use, we haven't used this in our school enrollment projections, but we use grade succession ratios to develop our school enrollments. But at least for the building permits data will provide us an tool to check the near-term enrollment growth in schools based on where developments are happening or where they have occurred in the recent past. So if the development occurred, obviously it would potentially lead to some students in that geography. So we would like to be able to more accurately project our school enrollments. And the final component, jobs projections of labor force, labor participation rates, and jobs by industry. This is in a way tied into the square footage of commercial, industrial, and retail spaces that are being developed as a part of the building permit activity. If that's captured, we would like to take a look at that and see what portion of that would yield what types of jobs. And as I said, we develop these job selections by industry level as well, so that will be helpful in that. So those are some of the items that we do. And this slide basically talks a little bit about the projections and how the projections help us. Like I talked about school enrollment projections. The school enrollment projections leads to school construction activity. So basically, the need for new schools or where there is an additional need for the type of schools, be it elementary, middle school, or high school. So that will be helpful. Infrastructure needs, like your roads, expanded capacity of water and sewer needs based on the projection of population. Social service needs, the population projection breaks down the population by age, race, and gender. And some of the social service needs can be for people who are over ages of 65 or for children. So based on what type of growth a particular jurisdiction is seeing, these social service needs could be addressed as needed. Households and housing and employment. I have talked about the household size, how we do this projection for household size. If there's an increase in average household size, there is probably a lot more growth in that particular jurisdiction. And the housing or the housing type, whether it's single family development or multifamily development, will give us an idea of the type of market and the needs of that particular area, and if the housing there is affordable, which, like I mentioned, we do an affordability analysis as well. And finally, the employment. The location of the employment will help us figure out whether there's an increase in workforce in a particular geography needed based on the employment, and is the employment and the housing units that are proposed or projected are in balance, like the jobs and housing units are in balance with the geography or the region. And finally, we would also probably like to take a look at, hopefully with data, the component of people working from home. And we have to figure out how that would, and going into the future, that might be a bigger factor of people working from home, and how this would affect the requirements or the needs for retail commercial space. And finally, the local future land use component. This basically will help us figure out, like I mentioned, the need for land to accommodate the growth in the jobs and the population right now, where they are, and potential need for future land use to accommodate the projected population in jobs. So that's helpful that way, the data for projections. And So we use building permits data in several different ways. And Chuck at the beginning of his presentation mentioned about the growth model, and the building permits data is going to be used in developing a growth model to looking at where the existing developments are and where the near future developments will be, and in the long term where the growth could potentially occur within our jurisdictions. And for comprehensive plan reviews, we review the housing element and the comp plan based on the type of housing that's existing, single family, multifamily, and the population growth that is cited in the comp plan, or the jobs that are anticipated in the comp plan growth element. Are they consistent with the housing needs, or if there's a balance between jobs and housing units at the local level? And one of the things that we do at the end of the year is an annual report that's prepared by the Planning Commission, reporting of residential activity for at least 50 or more dwelling units. The access to building permits data would help us put together that report a little more easily. Again, like, this is something which we not really do, but like, this is mostly an initiative by regional partners, the BMC and WashCog, where they develop PAZ, or the traffic analysis zone population and jobs projection. Building permits data will provide key information on where growth is happening at a smaller geography level, and see the future growth if this is consistent with what they are seeing, or what's going to happen in the near future. And I did mention about measuring compact development. Compact development basically looks at residential activity that's happening on 1/4 of an acre or less. And most of our multifamily units are on land that's less than 1/4 acre. We would like to keep track of that, because we report this metric as a part of our management for results as well. And this is a secondary component that could help us with the building permits data. The Department of Assessments and Taxation has a data set of basically identifying the parcels and the structures that are on the parcel. And in most cases, the structures, if it's a single family house unit, it's one structure on one parcel, it's easy to identify. But if there are multifamily units on a structure, the assessments department wouldn't necessarily need to know how many units are there. But for us, when we use this SDAT data for residential housing unit analysis or any planning specific projects, the multifamily units are not reported in that particular data set. So we would like to supplement what we would get from the building permits data on top of the multifamily units to identify the number of units in each structure. And also another component would be the mixed use development, where you have these developments which have retail and residential use in the same building, where the bottom part of the building is retail and you have residential units on the top. The SDAT only reports the square footage of the building, but identifying the number of units or the square footage of commercial area versus residential area would be helpful in figuring out the use and how many people or jobs are located there in the projection process. And finally, I mentioned about the reporting metrics for multifamily units as a part of a climate change initiative. Right now, we have been using the building permits data from the Census Bureau to supplement the multifamily units information, but having access to building permits data will make our data more accurate. And I have mentioned the issues with the Census Bureau's building permits data. It isn't actually the same that is reported by the jurisdictions that the Census Bureau puts out. So this will definitely help with our reporting metrics for multifamily units. So again, so how can we collaborate with you in terms of some of the tools and resources we have that we can share that will make it easier for you to use the data for your planning purposes, and for us to develop our projections or the analysis that we do using the data. Here is some of the data that the Census Bureau has available, or the data we have available to the Census Bureau on our website. All the socioeconomic data through ACS and other resources is posted on our website. And we also have information on jobs and income data from the Bureau of Economic Analysis on our website. The latest data we have is from 2019. We have migration data from the IRS and also the American Community Survey, the ACS. We are posting it on our website. The county business patterns data identifies not only the establishments, and the establishments are broken down by in what type of establishment, meaning the industry sector that establishment is, and the types of jobs that are in each establishment. That data is available on our website. We also have information on agricultural census. Again, most of the land, or majority of the land, is in farms, and the acreages of land that's in farms in Maryland. And also we have information on the income generated by farms and the demographic of the farmers. And one key component, most people probably are not aware, like the average age of a farmer is probably in the low 60s, unlike the median age of the population, which is in the around 40. So it's kind of concerning that way. Building permits data, this is something that we don't have access to. In a way, that's what we're asking for. That's something you can share with us. And going to other resources. I talked about projections here. Like I said, like we do projections by population, projections by age, race, and gender. We share this information on our website, and we would be happy to provide any kind of input or feedback in your projections. And not most, but several jurisdictions use our projections when they are developing their comprehensive plans. So we update our projections on not a 3-year cycle, but I would say as needed basis. Like with the new census data that's coming out, we will update our projections. We updated our projections towards the end of last year, actually towards the end of 2020. We will be updating them really soon. And all these projections that we do for housing units, jobs, income, and school enrollments, these are all mandated by Maryland law, and they are done in different cycles or different timeframes. And housing unit analysis projections and household size will give us an idea of the existing housing units and the type of housing units they are, and the household size, average household size projections sees if the increase in average household size, and this kind of helps you determine the demographic composition of the population as well. And we also do predictions by jobs, by industry, broken by 2-digit NIC sector, which is posted on our website. We also project in personal and per capita income that based on the jobs at the industry sector at a jurisdiction. And finally, the school enrollment predictions on a short-term basis, which is a 10-year horizon every year. So these are tools and resources we have, which quickly highlighting some of the dashboards we have. We have a dashboard on Snapshot Maryland, which basically identifies all the census geographies and how what geography to use when, and what type of data is available at these geographies. We have a dashboard for American Community Survey data. The American Community Survey data has a lot of information on socioeconomic variables for all geographies in Maryland. We have a few more dashboards in development, and we will be having these posted on our website to have them be available to everybody here. We also post our data on the Open Data Portal, and most of the data we talked about, all the census data, is also available on the Open Data Portal. And on the IMAP website, we post all the geographies. The latest Census 2020 geographies have been posted on MD IMAP for people to use them if you are working on your count question resolution project, or figuring out how your communities have changed. That's the IMAP. And finally, the next steps. So we are going to provide accessibility to our data through dashboards. This is going to be a little more easier than the way we have them as a report or as an Excel table. The dashboards will be interactive, where you can probably most likely be able to download data for a particular variable you're looking at, or even help with a visualization, seeing a trend in a particular geography, whether the population is growing or whether the income is going up or going down, what is the poverty. So we will have at least key variables that are mostly used as displays on a dashboard, basically letting the user select the geography and the variable and seeing a trend or having access to the information on what it is. We have in the past, and in the future also, we will provide training on how to access census data, not only on how we post the data on the website, but also how you can access the census data from the Census Bureau's website using an API, which lets you automatically connect to the Census Bureau server and set up your own dashboard. We have provided trainings in the past, and if there's any interest, we will be providing trainings in the future. And the whole idea behind this is like it's going to be a cost-effective process. We don't have to process this data as requested every time. What we are trying to do is make this data available interactively on the dashboard, or train the people who are interested in having access to the data, so you can develop your own visualizations. And so finally, how can you help? Share your data so we can have better access to the Census Bureau's data and provide them with feedback on rectifying or correcting any information that they have for Maryland, overall making the process a little better and easier for us. So that's my part.
Thank you very much. I will want to, we have a couple questions. I don't know if you want to put your webcam on. Al, I'm going to quickly go through this because we're running a little late, and apologize for us being running behind schedule here. We have one question about, Linda asked a question about how have local governments been engaged in the development of the growth model. They're actually, I would argue that they're, or answer that by saying they've been involved incrementally through the development. We worked closely with them on the generalized zoning, data input into that process. We, as well as in the land use survey, the land use map portion. And as we actually get the product ready to have further discussions, we're going to actually work with each individual county on, or municipality on developing some rules. And really what we're intended to do is to actually create a system that allows for you to have the flexibility of, using a slider or some means by which to tweak it one way or another. Second question that Linda asked is, how is some of the data being tracked by the building permit reporting system different than the annual reports? Unfortunately, not all jurisdictions submit annual reports to the state, believe it or not. So we don't get all of those. Secondly, the building permit reporting that we're hoping to collect is down to the parcel level, so that we can actually map that information in a hot heat maps or other means by which, so that the information that's usually reported to, at least to the state, tends to not be parcel specific or address specific. So I think there are going to be opportunities for enhancement. And again, if we can work together, we may be able to encourage or reduce the reporting that has to be done in one port, and we can reference it, or it can be copied or whatever in that respect. Appreciate the shout out from Queen Anne's County and Amy. And Bob raised a question about, or an observation about the open data portal, and data sharing needs to be a two-way street. Agree with that, and I'm going to follow up with Bob on that to get more information regarding that issue. Not a whole lot of other questions. We're running behind. Apologize for that, and thank you again, Al, so much. I'm going to turn off my video, my camera now, and we're going to go into updates. So again, thank you again, Al. So
pleasure.
we have several updates that we want to go through. And again, I apologize for being behind. I hope everyone can stay on a little bit longer if we go beyond noon. Our first one is from John T.J. Thomas, who's the Assistant Director from MDOT's Office of Planning and Capital Programming. And he's going to give us an overview of the Maryland State Freight Plan. So welcome, John. I think you're on. I think you're unmuted. So go ahead.
Hey, good morning. Thanks, Chuck. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to talk fast. So, Chuck, there's my slides. Awesome. So I'm John J.T. Thomas. I'm the Assistant Director, Office Planning Capital Programming at Maryland Department of Transportation. Lead the rail and intermodal freight team. I've been in your land use and transportation world for 15 years. One of the things my team is tasked with now is updating the statewide freight plan. It's a federal requirement for us to access federal funds, et cetera. So I'm going to quickly go through a couple slides and then I'll pass it back to you all so we can get back on schedule. A lot of economic development opportunities, trucks, issues, et cetera. So there is my next slide. The purpose is to move stuff. Everybody likes stuff, everybody needs stuff, et cetera. So all of the goals are consistent with things that you see in your comp plans, what we have in our Maryland Transportation Plan. The federal requirements are things like truck parking, supply chains, ports, e-commerce, et cetera. So, and most important, at the end of our state freight plan update is an implementation section. Next slide, please. All of this was informed by stakeholder outreach, a huge investment in data that all of the jurisdictions can leverage that Maryland has put in. So we know where the trucks are, we know where the bottlenecks are, we know where the trucks are parked in your communities, et cetera. We know where the freight dependent land uses are. So I'm gonna dig into some of the highlights here with the next slide. Safety and security. Crashes and safety, all of our transportation plans deal with that. Highway rail crossings, for example, not everybody has a rail yard in the middle of their community that is in between their town and some of their key destinations, but for example, the town of Brunswick does. So you have to get through the CSX rail yard to get to the C&O Canal National Park, the town campground and the boat ramp to the Potomac River. So that type of issue is in that, talked about in that section. Technology, automated vehicles, et cetera, that's coming with trucks too. And that's gonna be first, maybe even before our personal vehicles are there. Asset management, keeping all of our bridges and pavements in good condition, et cetera. So next slide. Congestion, obviously, big, huge issue for Maryland. We know where the truck volumes are. We know where the truck bottlenecks are. When we're talking about all the jurisdictions' priorities from a transportation perspective and how that pipeline of major projects gets developed, knowing what the trucks are stuck in and where they're stuck in, et cetera, is important as well. Truck parking. A quick example, I've been working recently with a Virginia jurisdiction and having the elected officials tell the traffic team, go out and fix this truck parking issue, sign the truck parking, sign the neighborhood so the trucks can't park there. At the same time, the development reviews are supporting truck supported land uses and not providing necessarily places for trucks to park. The zoning codes may not be up to date as far as accommodating truck parking. So talking to each other, understanding what those challenges are and making those opportunities so that instead of just adding capacity from a truck parking perspective, in the long run, can we actually deal with it proactively? Supply chains, again, opportunities versus issues. There's examples throughout the state where these freight dependent land uses are providing huge economic developments, jobs, et cetera. Not everybody has an interstate or a class 1 railroad or a Port of Baltimore in their neighborhood, but those jurisdictions that do are seeing a lot of success in leveraging those. So we talk a lot about that. Next slide. E-commerce, I'm gonna give one more example, and we obviously talk about ports and coordination and all that stuff. Everybody on this call knows how to do that and deal with that, and the county and the city of Baltimore do a great job with the port. E-commerce, I'll give you one example from a planning and zoning perspective in Montgomery County. Balancing the goal of maximizing your density and providing a nice walkable, bikeable, transit-oriented development around a metro rail station, and doing that while at the same time figuring out a place to have the freight, the last mile deliveries, a place to load and unload. That type of curbside management, that's why freight is important to your jurisdictions. That's an example. So how do we figure out a place for the trucks to do the deliveries and also have a place for separated bike lanes in the same place, that type of thing. So we touch on that. Next slide, please. We touch on the military installation. So whether you're Fort Detrick and Frederick or Aberdeen or Patuxent River, Fort Meade, etc., all of those places, those are very dependent on getting stuff in and out of those installations. So we touch on that. And we talked a lot about resilience and environmental and flooding earlier in the session. But recently, we have a sunny day like today, sunny, beautiful, windy day, and some of the last mile trucks are driving through a foot or two of water to make those deliveries. Yeah, on a windy basis, just on a windy day, just like this. So making sure that we can get prescription medicines and important freight movements in some of those vulnerable areas. So next slide. Our plans in a final draft review, we're going to have the public review throughout the summer. We'll make sure that this group gets to see that, and then we move on to our federal plans and adopt it later this year. Next slide. And hard to see, there's our contact information. If you just type in MDOT Maryland and Freight Plan or MDOT Maryland and Rail Plan, we're updating the rail plan at the same time. You can find us and you can find me. I'm jthomas33 at mdot.maryland.gov. So with that, I will pass things back to Chuck.
Thank you, John. Very much appreciated. And again, please contact John and the folks at MDOT if you have any questions. They'll be providing an opportunity for comments as they have a draft plan out there. So again, thank you so much. Moving on, next to we have Sylvia Mosser from our Resource and Management, going to provide a update on the Brownfield Redevelopment Assistance Program.
Hey, thank you, Chuck. Good morning, everybody. So we're planning several webinars for later this spring in collaboration with MDE and some of our other partners. Each of the webinars will be about an hour long, and the topics that we're looking into are grant writing for EPA brownfield grants, and additional funding that's available now from EPA due to the infrastructure bill, environmental due diligence to ensure that you at local governments are able to take the necessary steps during property transactions to be eligible for the EPA grant funding, and among some other topics that we're also exploring, and we'll keep you guys posted about that. We also have the 2022 Maryland Brownfield Conference that we're starting to think about planning. The first conference that we had this previous November 2021, was a success. So we're starting to collaborate with MDE again to just brainstorm about some ideas for the second statewide conference, which we're anticipating will be held again in November of this year. And we're always open to suggestions for session topics that are relevant to local governments. The third item on here is that we were awarded a community-wide assessment grant for brownfield sites in Baltimore County's east side, which is near Sparrows Point, which is pictured here. And that area is a priority area for the county. So we're nearing completion as far as where we're at with the grant. We're nearing completion of the first key phase of the project, which is putting out an RFP, request for proposals, for environmental consultants to conduct the assessments. We're also making progress in our collaboration with Baltimore County to initiate outreach to property owners of the target brownfield properties for the project. And then after that, we'll be reaching out to the community to explain the project and solicit some feedback. And Chuck, that's all I have.
Thank you, Sylvia. Moving on to the census and SDC update, Al.
Thank you, Chuck. I'm going to be real quick here. Just a quick update on some of the socioeconomic programs and the 2020 census, starting with the 2020 census. On the next slide, Chuck. So most of the information that we have available for the census has been posted on the website, the redistricting data. And this slide needs to be updated for the second part, which says summer of 2022. Yesterday, we got notification that the demographic and housing characteristics data is going to be released in May of 2023. So Census Bureau basically said they are looking into making sure that the data that they're going to release is secure and private, in the sense people cannot be identified. So this is taking them a little while, and the whole thing that happened during 2020 is putting that off the schedule. So anticipated release is May of 2023. So the next update is basically the census estimates program on the next slide. So far, we have released the Census Bureau released the 2021 estimates for Maryland's jurisdiction. That data has been posted on the website and also on our website. Later this month, next month, in May of 2021, May 26th of this year, the 2021 estimates data for the incorporated places or the municipalities will be released, and later in June, the data for the counties broken down by age, race, and sex and Hispanic origin will be released as a part of the estimates program. And on the next slide, I have information on the 5-year ACS data that was released on March 17th. We have processed this data for all the geographies. The data is available for Maryland. And we have posted demographic and comparison profiles for all the geographies on our website. And that's available right now. And we also put together a legislative handbook for the existing legislative districts based on key socioeconomic variables. That's available on our website. And later this year, we will be posting the migration data for the counties, basically people moving in and moving out of counties as well. So. And some geographic information updates. I mentioned like that we posted the 2020 geographies on MDIMAP. That's available. And we are going to process all the shape files and post them on our website as well. That would show the places geographies as of the 2020 census at the county for each county. And this data could be helpful in figuring out for challenges for count question resolution. If your boundary doesn't look right as what the Census Bureau says, this could be challenged, and they will rectify that through the count question resolution process. And it's key to make sure that the boundaries for the municipalities are accurate, because like all the population estimates data is going to be based off of the adopted or the geographies the Census Bureau has. And the final program I want to touch is the economic programs. We have data from the BEA, or the Bureau of Economic Analysis on Income and Employment for 2020, posted on the website. We are working on the county business patterns. We will be posting the data on the website later this year. And towards the end of the year, we will have the 2021 income and poverty estimates for all the counties posted on the website. That's it for me, Chuck.
Thank you, Al. It was a surprise on the 2020 delay of the census reports. We will have to see what we could do to augment using the ACS data for our local governments in that respect. So thank you again.
Yep. You're welcome.
So we have Shelley with the generalized zoning.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so we've been working on generalized zoning update for about the last 3 years or so. It's been a long process. And we have a draft application that includes our new data that we'll be sending out to review. It'll include not only the new data, but the old data so that you can compare. And then we'll also be, any comments that you would have, we'll gladly accept those. And if you also want to send us any new data to update it, we'd be happy to take that as well. Timeline, we're looking at sending that out sometime in about 2 weeks. So be on the lookout for that.
Thanks, Shelley. Much appreciated. Deb Sward, land use map.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Chuck. So I work with the Geospatial Data and Analysis Unit. My name is Deb Sword, and I just wanted to give a quick update on our statewide land use map. So just as a quick reminder, the statewide land use map shows the location of residential, commercial, industrial, and other types of developed land statewide, and kind of the general density of residential development statewide. So we last published one in 2010, and we initiated an update in 2020. So I think, as we mentioned in the last update, this one will just focus on developed land uses and will not differentiate between different types of undeveloped land uses, since undeveloped land use types like agriculture and forests and stuff like that have been mapped separately by the Chesapeake Conservancy starting in 2013. Next slide, please. Okay, so our process involves two different steps. So first, we classify all the parcels in the state using a combination of tax assessment data, as Chuck said before, and we also supplement that with data from the 2010 map and locally, or data provided by local jurisdictions in 2010 where possible, as well as some supplemental data sets. And once we've classified all the parcels, we go to step 2, which is to apply statewide modeling rules to each parcel to actually determine what extent of those parcels are developed. So if we can go to the next slide, I'll show an example of that. So as you can see, some of the smaller parcels on the left side, all of those are the land use fills out the parcel. But on some of these bigger parcels, we don't necessarily want to capture the whole parcel as developed. So we have to work on some rules for figuring out when do we follow the tree line, as is shown in the airport parcel to the left, versus a lot of large parcels also have a substantial amount of agricultural use on them, which we don't intend to capture. So in some cases, we may follow a buffer around the structures and impervious surfaces only. So kind of figuring out all those rules is something that we're also working on and testing out. And in addition, those rules could include some generalization rules or just anything that needs to be applied statewide, like if we had some supplemental statewide data set for utilities or something like that. Next slide, please. So where we are right now, we have draft outputs for 6 test counties from different parts of the state that are under internal review. We've included some counties where jurisdictions have asked us to kind of prioritize their county because they were particularly interested in this product. And we're going to have 2 review processes. So we'll be reaching out to jurisdictions about if they want to make any corrections to the way we classify the individual parcels. That's step 1 that I mentioned before. And then we're also going to try to have some focus groups or focus discussions on those statewide rules. So we'll be reaching out to jurisdictions about the classified parcels, and then we're going to be, if anyone's interested in participating in that statewide rules discussion, that will be kind of a separate discussion. So please let me know by 5/13 if you are interested in participating in one or both of these processes. I know we already have a list of contacts that we've developed over the course of the project, so we'll still be following up with everybody on those lists, or if you've reached out to me before. But if you haven't reached out to me, feel free to contact me. And that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Deb. On the last one, Sarah Deal.
Thanks, Chuck. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Deal. I am the Maryland Department of Planning's Compatible Use Community Planning Liaison. I'm just going to give a brief update on the Compatible Use Program and the development of the state's first Compatible Use website handbook. So at the last PDR, I gave an expanded overview on the project and talked a little bit about the process. I'm just going to use this time today to provide a quick update of where we are as we're coming to the end of the grant. So some of you might remember or even be involved with this project. This is a federally funded 2-part grant effort that's being facilitated by MDP and the Department of Commerce. I'll briefly talk about Commerce's role here in a minute or two. But the purpose of what MDP is doing is building a website and handbook that really builds awareness of the economic impact of the military mission in Maryland, but also build community engagement while really providing our local communities with the tools and resources that they need to ensure compatible use with military operations in their community. So this is an implementation of the 2019 statewide Joint Land Use Response Implementation Strategy, which was a statewide approach to addressing and identifying some of these compatibility issues. So throughout the course of this project, we've convened a group of over 50 stakeholders. So we've reached out to individuals at the local, regional, state, nonprofit, and military levels to collect information and really get a sense of how these deliverables can best benefit all of Maryland's military community. So again, I want to note that all phases of this project have been an interjurisdictional collaborative effort. Many of the jurisdictions that are on the line today may have been or have currently been engaged with this project activities, and I really appreciate everyone's participation. Here included on this slide is a list of some of the resources that we're looking to put within the website and handbook, but one of the most important things here, and as you can see there in that larger graphic, is that we're focusing on multifacets and scales of compatible land use practices. So while we're providing resources at the local, state, and federal level, but we're also creating resources at those same levels. So for example, not only are we pulling together existing resources such as that grantee guide from old CC programs and numerous guidebooks and primers, we're also creating new resources based on stakeholder feedback and a survey effort, as well as taking a deep dive and looking at some of the specific success stories within Maryland. So with that, if you can go to the next slide. So during the fall and winter of last year, we published a user or community experience survey to get a better idea of what some of those information needs, community compatibility topics that should be explored as part of the website, and really just to better understand how our adjacent communities interact with the different military installations. So we received over about 130 responses. Most of them came from the area around Joint Base Andrews, and most of the respondents were private citizens. So off the bat, well over half of respondents noted that the military installations in Maryland were really extremely important to the economic well-being of their community, citing the jobs, opportunities, and security that it provides. We did learn that one of the most helpful pieces of information that would help respondents familiarize themselves with the military mission was information about how military operations may affect daily civilian and community activities. And they also were looking for some summaries of the different military installations, followed by some of those other items listed here on the right, which I'm realizing might be a little hard to read. This is a very small overview of the survey and the results that we received. Full survey results will really give an additional insight into the ways that Marylanders seek out information on military operations, what types of information they would like to know, and types of policy and procedure considerations that people were interested in. So the big takeaway here is that we were and are able to respond to some of the information gaps or needs through materials that are being incorporated into the website. So I'm really looking forward to continuing that. You'll be able to view the full survey results by clicking on that giant red box when these slides are shared, or there's a project website that I have listed on the next slide, which you can also access them. So what do our next steps look like? So as we're working to wrap up, first, obviously, we need to complete all of the content development, and then we're working through a multi-phase review process as we build a demo website. Not only are we coordinating, directly within Maryland Department of Planning, we're pulling in Secretary McCord and Chuck and the rest of the executive team as a part of this review process, but ultimately we'll be working with the governor's office and the different military installations to review this information. And then once we get through that step, and once we have a significant chunk of information translated into a demo website, I plan to re-engage all of our different stakeholders throughout the spring and share the demo website and ask for any additional feedback. We'll also be working with the consultant team on this project to develop a sustainability plan for the website so that we can continue to maintain this as a valuable resource for the state. And we anticipate the site and handbook to go live this summer. I really want to stress that if you're on the call today and if you're interested in seeing a draft product or providing comments, or would just like to learn more about the project, feel free to reach out to me. My contact information is there, or you can visit the project website where you'll find lots more information and those survey results that I talked about. Next slide, please. This is my last one, I promise. So the one last thing that I do want to bring to everyone's attention is the other part of the other project that was a part of this federal grant that we received. The Department of Commerce is in the process of wrapping up the renewable energy siting project, and this will inform the energy industry where development will or will not have adverse impacts on the military, and therefore prevent possible conflicts with development after the purchase or lease of land. So the main deliverable of this particular project is a series of military and compatibility layers to facilitate that early coordination that is being integrated into DNR's Smart DG Plus tool. And there's also a supplementary report that contains a wealth of information. As part of their deliverables, there will also be a user guide that is a part of the larger project webpage that will eventually all be incorporated into the compatible use website that I just talked about. But for now, as they were ahead of us time-wise in terms of the grant, they're going to be posted on that same project webpage, where you can also find the survey results and other information about both projects. But if you're interested in that particular project, Jennifer Chason, who is the grant manager for that project, her email is also listed on this slide. And that's all I have, Jeff. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. We will be posting these PowerPoint presentations so you can get these contact information that is on this slide here for the contacts for each of these different updates. And we'll be, again, making this available for you along the way. As a wrap up for today, I just want to don't have any other questions. I want to thank everyone. First of all, I want to make a big thanks to Secretary McCord, our Chief of Staff, Ann Roots, Jason DeBoe, Matt Rowe, Al Sandera, John Thomas, Sylvia Mosser, Shelley April, Deborah Sward, and Sarah Deal. And particularly John Coleman, who is our communications and tech guru, that none of this would happen without him. So. And finally, thank you all for participating. Complete recording of today's webinar will be posted on Maryland's planning.maryland.gov's website under the Planning Directors Roundtable, along with any of the presentations. When you exit today's webinar, we ask that you take the survey to give us some feedback on the webinar and our planning director topics that we want to pursue in the future. Keep an eye on planning.maryland.gov and our e-blog postings, and visit smartgrowth.org for details of future webinars. We're endeavoring to provide you with planning webinars during these periods of more teleworking, and hopefully we'll get back to a hybrid situation. And look out for our monthly Planning Practice Monthly newsletter for topics of interest. And again, we encourage you to contact either your regional planner or myself if you have any questions or ideas and suggestions on how we can provide more information to every one of you. So again, thank you so much for taking the time. Appreciate you hanging in there a little beyond our 12 o'clock normal cutoff time. Have a great day and best of luck. Take care, folks.